Good morning. It's good to be here with you today. I think Vicar Adams said I was the pastor of Crossroads this morning. I don't know if you noticed that. If you did, I'm actually the pastor of St. Paul's, but that's all right. We'll let you slide. It's good to be here. I'm going to show my age a little bit. Wow, you guys really spread out as best as possible in this church. This is amazing. How many of you remember watching Star Trek, like the original ones? Does anyone remember that? Like, I'm talking the really bad videos that when you watch now, you're like, holy mackerel, that's actually just a cardboard box floating through the air on strings, like really bad stuff. Yeah, you remember that? There's some reruns still on channel whatever. I loved that one because I loved Captain Kirk, because it didn't matter what he was facing, he always got the ship through. And I don't know if you remember, but sometimes when he needed a little burst, he would yell out on the microphone, which was like a tin can with a string. He would yell out to Scotty and said, "We need more," whatever it was, "power in the front shields." And what did Scotty always yell back? Do you remember? Well, thank you. I can't do a Scottish accent. I'm really glad you were helpful. Yes, he said, "I'm giving it all I've got, Captain." And he would somehow get that ship to give as much energy as it could to the shields or the engines or whatever he needed at that point. Captain Kirk would always get through because somebody else gave everything they had, and they were able to slide through whatever the hard thing was that they were facing. And I feel like on some level, in the gospel lesson today, Jesus points to this widow and points out to her and invites us to see how she gives it all that she has. She's not Scottish, but she gives it everything she has in this situation. And that's what Jesus points out to the people in the long robes. It's always awkward on a Sunday when you're wearing long robes, preach about how the people in the long robes are doing the wrong thing. And Jesus points to the person who's not wearing those robes. He's pointing to the person who's actually in probably the toughest circumstances of anyone in this story. For years and years, I've read this story. How many of you have heard this story before? The widows might. Have you heard this? This is not the first time. Many times when I've heard this, I've always thought it's about stewardship of money. Did you ever hear that? And it was a sermon that would unfold about how all of us are supposed to give every single thing that we have to the work of the church. It was tough enough to hear that we're supposed to tithe, which is 10%. Now we're supposed to do what the widow does and give everything that we have to some ministry. And I realized maybe it's not just about money. Because I don't think Jesus is just pointing out the money. I think he's talking about stewardship of our faith. Stewardship of who we trust in. Stewardship of who we believe in the hard times when we need everything we've got. See, this widow is not leading an easy life. Maybe like some of your lives, she is going through incredibly difficult circumstances. But what might be a little bit different than our lives is that she's stuck in them. Even when she's having a good day and everything's going right, the culture around her is placing her below everyone else. She's lost her husband. She's obviously poor. She's on the outcast and the outside. She's one of kind of the least and little and lonely and lost of that area. And after all the people who seem to be important come up and give their large sums, she walks up very humbly and puts in this amazing gift into the treasury. So many times I've preached this even myself, and you get this sense that like everyone's done their big thing, and then she kind of crawls up from behind the rocks like this and kind of tosses this in. But what if they've done their thing, she proudly walks up and places that in there, knowing that what she's giving is a testimony to her faith in God. Knowing that she is proclaiming to herself and her God, and that's it, not for everyone else to see, that she has faith in a God who she knows can get her through anything. Because I think on some level, this widow understands that God has already given everything God has for her. What's so incredible, so many times we point out people in the lessons like Romans and Acts, and people who are living on the other side of Easter, people that maybe have seen the resurrection, people that know that Jesus, this one that is pointing to her, is going to even conquer death itself. But she has faith in God even before that. She doesn't know that that's going to happen. And yet she still walks forward and pours everything out into this relationship with God. And I thought, that's more than about money. That's about our faith in the hardest of circumstances, trusting in a God who's bigger than all of them, who's given everything he has for us. I thought about that a lot this week as I read about and watched the story unfold in California, where Sergeant Helis ran into a bar that was filled with gunfire to try and save other people's lives. And he literally gave everything he had for the people that he was going after. What an amazing gift of faith. What an amazing stewardship of his life. I've thought a lot this week about our veterans who served in our armed forces and went into various points of combat and said, I will give everything I have to defend this country. Even someone that I heard about their dad over at St. Paul's that lied about his age so that he could serve in World War II. Only to realize after serving that was a bad idea to lie about that. And how bad and hard it was that you guys have faced. What an amazing gift of faith that is. I pray for our firefighters who are out in California now battling these fires that are blazing out of control. As they take their own life and put themselves at risk and walk forward and say, I have faith that the calling that I have been given to do this calling is from God or from the community, wherever it is. And they show us that miraculous spirit of giving everything they have. How are we doing as disciples? Because I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we do probably, often I do, and not just wear the robes, I mean literally like wear the robes. Where sometimes I put myself in the place where life is a little too easy, and maybe I write that check and it's a little bit too easy, and sometimes I am a part of putting the widows of this day in their place. That's not what Jesus wants for us. The God who's given us everything wants us to live into our lives with a passionate faith like this widow, for this widow. A friend of mine who's a pastor in Baltimore was telling me, and in Baltimore has been through a tremendous amount of turmoil and social justice, and she's right in the inner city of it. This pastor was going to, after the shootings in the temple in Pittsburgh, she was going to a vigil. And she realized that she's been to many of these vigils, and she walked in and she said, I was struck that it was halfway through the vigil that I realized I was numb. That I didn't even realize what I was doing because I've been to so many of these. That even my faith, she said, became about just showing up and being there, but not really getting what God was calling me to do. And she looked down at the bulletin, and it said this on the cover: keep vibrating. Don't go numb. Give it everything you have. She realized that our calling in the world is to be in the midst of the hard times. The things that we've seen on the news in the past few days. I heard a CNN reporter say that as they were reporting the shooting in California, they said, we're here to tell you today that this is the greatest mass shooting in the United States and we're so used to wanting to hear years. 11 days. He said, to the point where are we becoming numb to it? Are we standing there with those who are in robes and just allowing things like this to happen? Keep vibrating. Don't go numb. Give it everything you have. Allow that faith that God has given to you to be like the widows. Carry you forward, to propel you forward with whatever you have, even something that might look to others as only a couple pennies. To walk forward with that into this world where so many people are hurting. And maybe there are people who are friends and family right here at Crossroads or in this community. To be able to walk to them and stand with them and tell them about the God who has already gone and given everything God has for each and every one of us. And to place that into that basket of hope that someone will receive, that basket of grace, that basket of forgiveness for our family members who we're arguing with, that basket of companionship for somebody that we know of that's just gotten some incredibly difficult health diagnosis. To be the widow that stands with those people. So may we hear in the midst of the circumstances that we are in this week, a vibration from God that moves us, that propels us forward, that helps us understand that our gifts are enough and our gifts are miraculous when we give them in faith into the world, when we give everything we have. Amen.